climbing spots. But basically, when they went up to New Hampshire, they wouldn't take me
Mhm.
pretty much because I couldn't climb anything. It wasn't any good. And brothers can be like, family can be like that, right? So I asked them, well, what I need to do? Well, you need to climb like a 5.8. You know, that's they have that point system, and it's originally a big hard hike is a 5.5. Now they do up to 5.15, 5.14. Back in my day, a 5.10 was about the hardest you can do. You know, because 5.10 was right the pinnacle, 10,
Yeah.
and then they started going over 11 and 12, but 5.8 was pretty up there. You know, it was not an easy climb. Well, we had one. It was an arch, a reservoir arch in Wellesley. So one summer, I took the entire summer, got my neighbors, my brothers would occasionally go, but they were rock climbing, right, or working. And I would go up every day almost because I was a young kid and like, I don't know, ninth grade maybe, eighth
Yeah.
or ninth. I can't remember what age I was, pretty young. I spent almost every day during the summer.
Oh
By
my,
the end of the summer, I could climb that thing.
that's
And,
crazy.
but I was dead dog determined.
That's
And
impressive. One summer going from not really climbing at all to a 5.8, just that's dedication.
it was dedication. And that is my MO for when I want something to be done. I don't give up. And so then my brothers would take me climbing. So I always remember that first pinnacle because that made me say I can do this, and it helped me later on as I did rock climbing with my brothers. And I think one of my favorite things I ever did wasn't the hardest climb. I don't honestly remember the hardest climb because oftentimes there's short little pitches.
Yeah.
I remember though being able to climb with my brothers out west at the time, and we climbed all over the the Colorados and the Rocky. I don't remember doing anything that was way hard. My brothers maybe were doing, but because they were bigger mountains, so you just got to do these big routes, and that was just really kind of like icing on the cake after all those years, you know. And I just enjoyed the heck out of it, you know, when I was doing it. But of course, it takes a lot of time to stay up, and then you get so snobby, right?
Yeah.
I was snobby when I went out to New Mexico. People were climbing, and one, you know, I'd lost my brother, so I was a little not. I had a, you know, a little. I think unconsciously, at least, it could have kind of like didn't want to be there,
Yeah.
you know. But I remember all my friends, and some of my friends knew very well how I climbed.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so anyway, so they would ask me to climb, and I think by then I had already started to say I got to study, and also too, I found that you know, for me to be at the level I wanted to be at, I had to climb a lot more than going out once or twice, and that was just I think my little childish ego at the time. But you know, that's kind of my climbing. But all the methodologies though, one thing we learned in climbing was stay calm and definitely you go through. You didn't bring a physical checklist, but everybody did these checks, and you would have these things like belay on belay, you know, and you'd have call and response, and if somebody didn't answer, you didn't assume, you know. And a checklist is often like that. This checklist is not making assumptions, and I like that too because I love facts. I was like, I'm totally can live by facts. I don't, you know, my ego is such that it's like, yes, I'll be wrong, but you know, I'm gonna be like, cool, let's just call it, because then it all works out, you know, since that's what my dream is just be factual based. So I love that call and response because it is or isn't, right?
Yeah.
You know, do you have the rope on, you know? And then, you know, the guys will say off belay because we would unhook. And if you called off belay and the other guy wouldn't know to go, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that you had to go through, little processes, you know?
Did you ever have like a moment on the mountain that you were like, holy crap, what am I doing right now? Like, did you ever that
Of course. Yeah, a whole lot of them, probably, you know, every other week, you know? If you're not climbing hard, if you're not having those moments, you're probably not climbing hard enough.
Yeah.
That was the way we looked at it. Yes, I mean, dealing with fear is an inherent quality of that. Some people handle it better. Your Uncle Jeff was really great at kind of remaining calm. I'm a pretty calm guy, but you know, there's levels, and there's always somebody, you know, and you have to But yeah, so there were climbs where as you learn how to lead, so it means you can take a fall and not, end up um, at the end of the rope or falling back into something. And yeah, I had many moments where I went up and I took a fall and I wasn't sure if as we called it, hitting the deck,
Yeah.
where you weren't high enough on the climb yet, but you would let out so far that the rope could come down and you could fall and hit the ground, and that kind of sucked. I remember a couple of times, one time when I was out in this small, good-sized cliff out in Western Mass, and I was leading this climb. My brothers had mostly done all these things before, so that I never had the glory of doing the first one.
Yeah.
But I get up there, and I slip, and I'm about 50 feet up maybe, and the beyond at least 50 feet up maybe, and maybe 60 or 80. And I had some pieces of protection, but I was off the piece of protection probably 30, 40 feet. So I was, if I had hit the ground, if I had let go, which I ended up doing, at some point I lost my grip and I fell. I was like screaming to the ground. And I remember holding onto the rope and trying to pull on the rope and then lifting my legs up so I didn't snap my legs, not thinking really about what will happen if I hit my butt, but that's what I did. And I bounced off the ground, luckily just like, just tipped it. And I was just like, holy crap. Yeah, that was pretty good, and lots of moments where you're out. Most of the time we were really pretty careful. We didn't do many dumb things, but you go off and you lead too far, and you could hit the ground. You worry about a piece falling out, the protection you put in.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you start to fall. If the pieces start to pop, you don't know which one's going to pop, and so you have those moments, and they always kind of occur. So it's a calculated risk you make, and the hope is that you learn to deal with that. And then climbing solo, I did some of that. We all did some of that. Nothing like those guys in the movie,
Yeah, like not like Alex Honnold these days and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that was insane. But we did stuff at our level at the time that, if you fell, you were a goner,
Yeah.
But it's funny, oddly enough, and that sometimes, occasionally, most of the time I've tried to stay really carefully in my game on that.
Mhm.
But occasionally you make a miscalculation.
Yeah.
Usually I try to find that if I miscalculate, I can back off, and go someplace else, because it was supposed to be fun and scary, but not deadly.
Yeah. So do you think, because you say you have, you have fear and you're finding calmness all at once, sounds like in climbing, do you think that's why you kind of always felt the connection to like Zen and stuff, is because like it's like that grounding?
I don't know. Well, I don't know whether the climbing or whether or not, I think maybe it's like things in life. If you look at what you gravitate towards, it, I think that has a lot to do with your personality. So I don't think climbing created my interest in Zen. I think my personality created my interest in climbing. It also coincidentally created my interest in Zen. And then when you look at them, it's more like a triangle.
Yeah.
So, and you look at the facts of my personality and go, oh, I could see how he would rock climb and doing that. And then there's another part of my personality, the calmness, right? So I don't have I have a pretty high fear threshold, physically anyways. I'm not so much emotionally inside. But physically, I'm not scared of very much at all, ever.
Yeah.
Since I was a little kid, and most of my brothers felt the same way. And it's just something we were born with. But we also were calm. And I think we searched for that. We're also hired. I just always found the message of Zen very interesting. I like the idea of facts too. Zen, I think one of my interests, the way I talked about facts earlier, Al, is one of the things I think I always liked about, I've always believed in some sort of spirituality, but I believe with Zen, the attraction there would be was that it was almost verifiable, the way they present it. So the idea is that if you study Buddhism, it doesn't rely on believing in another God, or it doesn't rely on believing in a miracle. It doesn't rely on belief. It believes on experience,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I think that was really attractive, you know? And it made sense. And there's sort of a faith that there is a higher, maybe higher power, but maybe better. There is some sort of good. Like Plato had this thing, you know, I forget what he called it. In his belief that there was a perfect order to the universe, you know, and I forget what he called it, but I think that attraction, I can see that attraction, I feel it anyways. That's one thing I've always felt it, and I have believed in that feeling. But the feeling is something almost verifiable in a sense, right? You can feel a certain way, and then that's a feeling. It has a certain relevance. So I've always, and I think Zen, the idea that you could experience and understand, Zen had that thing, and I think that was that. I think those two things blended together. You know, that idea that you could take and explore things too. So there's definitely some sort of personality connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's really cool. Wow. Let me try to see. Find a question for you.
Okay. Where's your 15-minute thingy?
I was able to reset it and start the next video pretty smoothly already.
Wow.
I guess when you were climbing and stuff, oops, wait, I lost you. So I guess, you know, during that period of life, did you have a certain motto or quote that you kind of hung closely to?
Now, that was a time in my life when I was that young. I was also very self-directed at school. I didn't attend a lot of classes. Spent a lot of time at the library, and I don't know why. I just was very stubborn. And I was reading all this great literature, and I thought about not rereading it, but listening it and exploring it, because I got a lot out of it. But it was just more like trying to drink from a fire hose, you know. And so many people, and I was very methodical again. I started with stuff from all the way from Gilgamesh.
Oh my gosh.
You know, from that stuff. I was very fascinated by the Greeks. I just really admired their culture a lot. It staggers my imagination to think how much and intelligent their civilization was thousands of years with such low technology. You know, it is still, you can still read their stuff today, and there's still enormous wisdom there.
Yeah.
So all that stuff. And I just started reading up all the way through, you know, from the Greek to the Roman writers to the Middle Ages. That was a kind of a drought for me. I remember reading Erasmus and and these guys are Rabelais. No, he was later, but and I was reading a lot of European. I didn't read many Asian, just because, you know, but all that stuff. So the quotes in my head at the time, you know, there were probably a lot of them rumbling around in my head.
Yeah, there wasn't one specific one you always kind of had.
No, I didn't have one particular, you know, I was not a mantra-driven person. I think you know, if there's anything in my head at that time was, you know, was the idea of you know, trying. I've always believed that if you think you should do it, you should try it, you know, and that was really much, and you know, I think that's really where my head was. And I remember, well, there was this quote that always, and I've had this little quote in my head. I don't think about it often, but, and I don't know how much I reflect on, because at the same time, I'm a teenager, and, you know, I'm always self-confident, but of course, you always have enormous doubts, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I usually was able to work through them, but I had them just like any other person. Even now, of course, it's just human nature. Yeah. I just remember one thing my mom told me when I was probably 2, 3, 4, as young as you could possibly be and understand. And I remember, you know, and she said this repeatedly, because you'd have scuffles with your neighbors or your brothers, and somebody would tease you, you'd be upset, and she'd go in, and she would always say, I'd be upset, and they were mean to me or this and that. And she goes, you know, she'd look at me and she'd say, you know, she never said, she would say, you know, she would just say, remember, it doesn't matter what other people think. You know, it matters what the people who love you think. That's what she always said, and it was so reassuring that I didn't have to please the world, right? I just had to please the people around me, right?
Yeah.
See,
Easy.
I'm gonna cry on this one. That's a great one. She
Yeah.
said that to me all through when I was just a little kid in elementary.
That is really
And
nice.
I know when I was older and a teenager and doing stuff that definitely my parents were, and oddly enough, I used it, of course, to not listen to them. Here's
That's
how this,
interesting to
here's
that.
how that played out in my head, hon. When I was probably that big, I said, you know what? It gave me the self-confidence that do what you believe in, because that self translated into do what you believe in. You can't worry about what other people think. You got to do what you think. And you know what? Most of my friends are always reassuring. You know, they may laugh at me and make fun. You know, our friends do that, but they were always like, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, my parents, you know, as a teenager, not going to class often enough, you know, and I was reading these weird books, and you know, I remember I'd moved up to the attic, and I took my mattress away and was sleeping on a rug for a few months. That didn't work out so well, but my mother thought I was insane
Why did you do that?
because I was reading all that Buddhism stuff, you know, and I thought this would be good for my back. It was very spiritual. Yeah, I'm a teenager. What was I thinking? I don't know. It hurt like hell. I'd actually got up there was a piece of plywood in the attic. I took that, laid that because I wanted a flat because the attic was all bumpy and thing. And then I got this old antique rug. And then I put my sheets in my pillow. My mom came up and she thought I had lost my mind and it made her angry because then she wanted me to not do it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, nope. Okay.
Oh my God.
You know, and I was like, you know, and it was just silly. I think later on I found this old other ratty mattress. By that time, my mom was not really tired, but it was the same thought process. Still
Yeah.
through that time, the thought process, it doesn't matter what other people think. It matters those who love you. But somehow I think I had metamorphed, you know,
You
contorted
kind of
that.
just made those people that love me as myself, you know.
Exactly. I think that was
You kind of,
very self-centered. That's all I can think, you know. And it did really help though in terms of, you know,